listening to the Wrestle Havoc Podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We talk all that goes on in the realm of WWE and AEW every week. And now, here's your host, the one that will give you a reality check on pro wrestling, Flamin' Ricky DeReyes. This is the Wrestle Havoc Podcast.
What's up, everybody? It is Flamin' Ricky DeReyes, right here on the Wrestle Havoc Podcast, here to review Monday Night Raw from June 5th, 2023. We got a lot of things to talk about right here on the Raw review. Of course, the big thing that we are going to be talking about is Seth Rollins making his first title defense as the World Heavyweight Champion against the Judgment Day's Damian Priest, as well as we had a lot of great in-ring action on the show. This wasn't a bad show nonetheless. I definitely enjoyed the show for what it was. And we had a match, a 20-minute great television match with Gunther wrestling Kevin Owens. We also had Money in the Bank qualifying matches as well right here on the show. Of course, we are on the road to Money in the Bank. And the biggest question that we really need to ask ourselves is there tension when it comes to the Judgment Day? So we're going to be talking about that, all that, and much more right here on the Raw Review, right here on the Wrestle Havoc Podcast, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the frickin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, the Wrestle Havoc Podcast is also available on audio platforms. It is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. So if you guys want to listen to the Wrestle Havoc Podcast in audio format, it is available on all of those platforms. Let's get right into the show. The show kicks off, of course, with the World Heavyweight Champion, Seth Rollins, of course, who defeated AJ Styles at Night of Champions in the opening match of the show to crown a new World Heavyweight Champion. Of course, the crowd is singing his song, and of course, Raw is taking place in Hartford, Connecticut. He welcomes us to Monday Night Rollins, and he has to tell us that 1 week as the World Heavyweight Champion has been a non-stop party. He was thinking to himself, when was the last time we had a heavyweight championship match live on Raw? He had to go into the way back machine because it has been nearly 2 years, and he thought to himself, 2 years is too damn long. He went into the Twitterverse, and he put out an open challenge for a World Heavyweight title match tonight in Hartford, Connecticut, and that open challenge was answered by the Judgment Day's Damian Priest. But he has to be honest, he's kind of psyched about it, because last week he came out here and wanted to fight all the people that he could fight, and whether you like them or hate them, every one of the Judgment Day are as good as it gets. So he's looking forward to the match, and what's good is that they just ain't him. Then Damian Priest and Finn Balor come out, and they say that Rhea and Dom have their own business to worry about. Seth should only worry about him. Of course, that being Damian Priest. Seth says, and he asks Finn, and he holds the door for him, holds his hand when, he just does whatever he does. Finn completely interrupts because, of course, Seth Rollins was on the verge of making a bathroom joke. And after that, Finn says he ain't going to leave when Damian beats him. He's going to love it when Damian Priest beats him and takes the World Heavyweight title from him. Damian Priest then says he is a deserving champion, and his resume speaks for himself. His entire career has been great, so, tonight he will not fall, but he will be clear. He doesn't need Dominic, he doesn't need Rhea, or he doesn't need Finn Balor to beat him for that world title. Seth says that he knows if it was just he and him, he does not stand a chance. What does he have to say when he puts his money where his mouth is? He leaves his crew in the back, and also leave Finn in the back, because it doesn't bode well for him when it's in a fight against him, yours truly, of course, Seth Rollins. Damian Priest accepts, and at the end of the night, Damian Priest stated that he will be the World Heavyweight Champion, and he will go down in history as one of the shortest reigns ever, that being Seth Rollins. Seth then immediately replies and says, in any way you put it, his title reign was way longer than Finn Balor's title reign was. Of course, he's mentioning back in 2016 when he beat Seth Rollins at SummerSlam at the Barclays Center, and his title run only lasted roughly around 24 hours because he had to relinquish it due to a shoulder injury. So that was a nice little shade right there thrown to Finn Balor. But overall thoughts on the segment, man. I thought the segment was great. It was a great segment to open up the show. The fact that we had a title match with Damian Priest and Seth Rollins was a great decision, in my opinion. And honestly, out of everybody in the Judgment Day, Damian Priest can definitely break out on his own and definitely become a big star for it. I think Judgment Day has done Damian Priest a lot of wonders, and it's great to see that now he is in a match against Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. But is he the main guy to take away the World Heavyweight Championship from Seth Rollins? Absolutely not. I don't see him winning a World Championship now anytime soon, but he will eventually get there in the future. But the fact that, he added the stipulation of, hey, I don't need any member of the Judgment Day, I can do this all by myself, definitely seems, very interesting, especially what we saw at the end of Raw with Finn Balor ended up interfering in the match and basically, Seth Rollins eventually retaining the World Heavyweight Championship. Could that cause a little bit of tension within Judgment Day? We will be talking about that as we head towards the main event. But nonetheless, it was a great segment. And I completely forgot to turn off that intro. I always do that, man. It always happens, especially if I'm in a day where I'm rushing like crazy. I tend to forget a lot of things. In our first match of the evening, we got a Money in the Bank qualifying match. We've been getting Money in the Bank qualifying matches for the past week. And this time it's for the women. We got Sonya Deville taking on Becky Lynch. Not a bad match whatsoever. I think it was pretty obvious that Becky Lynch was going to be getting the win. Sonya, throughout the majority of the beginning of the match, is in control. We got a side headlock takeover and we got a side headlock and then a takedown by Sonya. It wasn't a side headlock takeover. MJF would be proud. We got a right hand by Sonya, and then Sonya runs into a back elbow by Becky, but then Becky eventually hits a clothesline. And then she hits a drop kick on Sonya, but then Becky ends up hitting the exploder suplex. After that, Becky ends up going for a back elbow, but then Becky hits the crossbody off the second rope. Trish Stratus then comes out with Zoey Stark, and then we get a bunch of waistlock exchanges by both Sonya and Becky. Becky goes for the cover, and we get a near fall. At this point, Sonya Deville goes to the outside, and then once we're back from commercial break, Sonya ends up hitting a superplex. We then get a cover by Sonya and a near fall, but then both exchange shots. We get repeated right hands by Becky, but then Sonya ends up retreating. After that, we get a drop kick by Becky. At this point, Chelsea Green gets involved, and then Sonya ends up hitting a boot. We then get a cover and a near fall. Both women exchange shots. We then get an enziguri by Becky Lynch. Becky is on the apron, but then Chelsea Green gets involved. Becky Lynch ends up taking her out, and then she sends her to the barricade. And then she sends Sonya to the barricade, and then she takes Sonya back into the ring. She misses the manhandle slam attempt, and then we get a roll-up by Sonya, and we get a near fall. Becky then tries to apply the disarmer, but then we get a roll-up by Sonya, and we get a near fall. At that point, Sonya gets caught into the manhandle slam after attempting a jumping knee, and we get a cover, and Becky Lynch wins the match and qualifies for the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match. Overall, not a bad match whatsoever. Could it be a match that I honestly could care about? No. Do I think Becky Lynch is going to be winning the Money in the Bank? Absolutely not. I think that spot for the Money in the Bank ladder match is 100% Io Sky. The two people that should win the Money in the Bank are LA Knight and Io Sky. There's no bones about it. Number one, Io Sky should break away from Damage Control. I've constantly said this all the time on the show. Damage Control is a failed experiment. It just doesn't work, and Io Sky is so much better off being on her own, and rather than being in the shadows of, Bayley. And honestly, LA Knight is on the verge of getting super popular with the audience that I think it's safe to say you have to put Money in the Bank on LA Knight, but that is just me. But nonetheless, overall, this was not a bad match. Becky Lynch wins the match, and she is qualified for the Money in the Bank ladder match. We got Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in a backstage interview, and they talk about, it's nice to see what the Usos and do what they should have done. Jimmy Uso did all of that. It's great to see that, that Jimmy Uso did what he did at Night of Champions. Let's see what will happen to Jay. But then Ludwig Kaiser, of course, being a part of Imperium, he comes in and says that they will be a problem with those tag team titles. And, of course, Kevin Owens gets so pissed off, he goes on a rant. I've been really enjoying these past couple of weeks, with Kevin Owens, just going on these tirades on the microphone or in promos. Like, it's just fantastic. He goes on a rant. Gunther comes in and tells Kevin Owens that he is a disciplined man and he needs to teach him some discipline. And Kevin Owens immediately replies, okay, there's a ring and there's people. Let's fight and go to the ring. And then Kevin Owens just immediately just runs to the ring. The camera's following Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens goes in the ring, and the match ends up being official. And we got Kevin Owens versus Gunther. Overall, man, this was a great match. Anything, I always come on the show and say the same thing, but when I say these things, like, these things matter because, of all people that WWE has been booking well ever since Triple H took over the creative reins, Gunther has been on a tear. And it's safe to say, Gunther has treated the Intercontinental title in a way that it hasn't been treated before in a long-ass time. The Intercontinental Championship, really the last time, in my opinion, that the Intercontinental title was really this important was The Miz back in 2016. Some people might even say Seth Rollins in 2018. But honestly, man, Gunther holding the Intercontinental title for as long as he has so far and really on the verge of beating the Honky Tonk Man, like, I'm 100% down for Gunther's run. And I've always stated, man, Gunther is on the verge of becoming a world champion. Now, with Kevin Owens and Gunther, this match ended up, I believe, ending in a DQ. Actually, no, it actually ended up with Gunther stealing the win. I literally thought this match was ending in a DQ. No, I'm wrong with that. Gunther actually got the win in this match, and you could sit there and be like, oh, but Kevin Owens lost. But, I mean, when it comes to tag teams in WWE, like, they always have, tag teams, lose. Gunther is not getting pinned anytime soon, and I think it was definitely the right decision for Gunther to get the win. But it's not a scenario in which Kevin Owens, got buried, because a lot of people on the internet have this perception of, oh, if a wrestler loses a match, that immediately points to them being buried. And Kevin Owens was not buried. He wrestled Gunther for 20 minutes in this match and looked phenomenal. But let's get on with the match. Both lock up. We get a side headlock takeover by Gunther, followed by a shoulder tackle. We get a furious slap by Kevin Owens on the face of Gunther, followed by a side headlock by Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens then goes after Gunther with a couple of right hands. We get a couple of chops by Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens ends up hitting an uppercut, and then he runs into a boot by Gunther. Gunther then fires back with the German suplex. Once we're on the outside, Gunther drives Kevin Owens onto the barricade, and then Gunther drops down Kevin Owens on the apron. Kevin Owens runs into a slam by Gunther and then twists the neck of Kevin Owens using his whole body. Gunther then drives the elbows of Kevin Owens, and then Gunther continues to be in control. Kevin Owens then tries to fight back, but then Gunther goes, he drops him down with a boot. Covered by Gunther into near fall. We get a chop by Gunther, and then Gunther ends up going for a modified Boston Crab. And then he transitions and drives his elbows on Kevin Owens, and he applies the crossface on Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens fights back with the chop. We then get a chop by Gunther. You know how Gunther is when it comes to his chops. Gunther then tries to pick up Kevin Owens, but then Kevin Owens tries to counter, but then Gunther ends up hitting a furious lariat. And then he ends up hitting a second lariat after that. Kevin Owens fights back, clotheslining Gunther. When Kevin Owens tries to clothesline Gunther, Gunther ends up no-selling it. We get a German suplex by Gunther, but then Kevin Owens is up on his feet. We then get a German by Kevin Owens on Gunther, but then Kevin Owens and Gunther exchange shots. Kevin Owens goes for repeated stops, but then he fights back with a series of super kicks. He ends up hitting the cannonball. After that, we get a cover into near fall, but then Gunther counters the stunner into a sleeper. Gunther ends up hitting the drop kick, and then we get an overhand chop. Then Kevin Owens ends up hitting the Fisherman's Buster. We get a cover into near fall, but then Kevin Owens is on the top. Gunther comes in, and he ends up hitting a superplex off the top. After that, we get a cover by Gunther into near fall. After that, Gunther goes to the top. He tries to go for the splash, but then Kevin Owens ends up getting the knees up. Kevin Owens goes to the top. He hits the Swanton, and we get a cover by KO into near fall. Imperium then fights off with Sami Zayn on the outside, but then Kevin Owens actually enters the fray and tries to help Sami Zayn because he was being ganged up by both Ludwig Kaiser and Giovanni Vinci. After that, Kevin Owens comes in, he comes back, he tries to hit the stunner on Kaiser, and he ends up doing it, but then Gunther immediately goes for the roll-up on Kevin Owens, stealing the victory, and Gunther wins the match. Overall, great television match, great match, when it comes to the caliber of the talent that both Kevin Owens and Gunther have. Again, Gunther is definitely on the verge of a run of a lifetime, and I think, with Gunther holding that IC championship for as long as he has, and most likely holding it probably for the rest of the year, it's definitely going to be solidifying Gunther as an unstoppable force in the next couple of months. And another thing is, again, Gunther should be a world champion. If there's any guy that should beat Seth Rollins, it's 100% Gunther, man. Gunther as the world heavyweight champion, sign me up. Matt Riddle, we get a backstage interview with Matt Riddle. He talks about Imperium. Imperium come in, and Kaiser basically gets in the face of Matt Riddle. And what happens is Matt Riddle goes for the first shot and just brawls with Imperium backstage. And then he applies the ankle lock on Giovanni Ricci, and then the referees and producers come in and break things up. After that, we got Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler taking on a new team, of course, being called up from the WWE draft from NXT, Katana Chance and Kayden Carter. Of course, backstage, Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler had a backstage interview, and basically what happened was Katana Chance and Kayden Carter challenged them to a match on Raw. And honestly, it's safe to say that this match was nothing but a great match overall. I believe the match was like roughly around 10 minutes, but it was enough time to really make Katana Chance and Kayden Carter look good. You know, one of the things that I constantly go on this show and complain about is the women's division as a whole. I feel like the women's division in WWE has been booked atrociously. Like, the women's division is not being booked well, and one of the reasons is the women's tag team titles. The women's tag team titles in the WWE are the most useless titles, not only in WWE, but they're the most useless titles in all of wrestling. And the biggest problem with those championships is that there are no real women's tag teams in the division. And with a team like Katana Chance and Kayden Carter, that is a team that is an actual women's tag team. So the fact that they were actually called up for this division, honestly, was nothing but a good decision. And even though Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler won this match, Katana Chance and Kayden Carter looked phenomenally well. They looked absolutely really good in this match. So Kayden Carter and Shayna start. We get a roll up by Carter. We get a 1 count. We then get a drop kick by Carter. Katana Chance tags in. We get a double team by Chance and Carter. After that, we get a cover and near fall. Ronda Rousey tags herself in. We then get a kick by Ronda, and then she picks up Carter, and then Katana Chance interferes. She takes Carter to the outside, and then Ronda drives the knees of Katana Chance, and then applies the armbar onto the top rope of Chance. We then get a super kick by Carter, taking out Ronda Rousey. We then get a crossbody by Carter on Shayna onto the outside. And then Chance ends up hitting a tornado over the top rope on Ronda on the outside, which looked pretty badass. After that, she takes Ronda back into the ring, but then Shayna interferes and attacks Katana Chance when Ronda is distracting the referee. After that, Ronda regains control with the takedown, and then Shayna tags in. She ends up hitting a sliding kick on Katana Chance, that being Shayna Baszler. We get a cover and a near fall. Shayna then targets her elbow by stomping on it, and then we get a kick by Chance, but then Shayna picks her up. Chance then lands on her feet, and then she tags in Carter. We then get a drop kick by Carter, and then we get a roll up by Shayna Baszler. Carter then escapes and hits a kick onto the face of Shayna Baszler, and then she drives her boot on Shayna Baszler. Chance then drives Shayna on her head, and then we get a cover and a near fall, and then Ronda tags in. We get a kick by Ronda, and then we get a roll through, and she picks up Carter, and then Chance ends up going for the blind tag. Ronda then lands shoulder first after that onto the ring post, and Chance is on the top, and they end up hitting the after party, which is basically a 450 splash and a neck breaker combination, which looked pretty dope. We get a cover and a near fall by Chance. After that, Shayna ends up dragging Chance onto the outside, but then Carter hits a dropkick on Shayna. After that, we get a crossbody by Katana Chance. After that, Ronda catches Chance and applies the ankle lock. After that, Chance escapes. She ends up hitting a code breaker, and then Shayna tags in. We get a back elbow by Chance, followed by a knee by Shayna Baszler. We then get a roll-up by Carter and a near fall, and then we get a kick by Shayna on Carter. She ends up hitting the suplex and then applies the Karabuta clutch on Carter, which leads to Carter to tap out. And Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey end up winning the match. So even though Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler won this match, Katana Chance and Kayden Carter looked phenomenally well. See, this is the type of shit that we need to see on WWE television. You know, when it comes to the women's tag team division, you know, those titles are dead to water. But if you want to, I don't want to say revitalize them because they were never popular to begin with. If you really want to make the titles mean something, you have to have you need to have a team like Katana and Kayden. You really do. And they definitely showcase Katana Chance and Kayden Carter very well. The amount of time that they gave them was enough time to really showcase all their skills. And overall, I think they did pretty well for themselves. So hopefully in the near future, maybe we can get a push with Katana Chance and Kayden Carter because they are an actual tag team in the women's division. That is exactly what we need. And WWE right now does not have that, but hopefully they can be on the verge of making those tag team titles mean something. All right. We get a backstage interview with Bronson. Actually, no. Ricochet is backstage, and Bronson Reed comes in. And Bronson says that he beat him weeks ago, but yet he's in the Money in the Bank ladder match, and he isn't. Ricochet then says he earned his shot against The Miz, and he mentions his loss against Shinsuke Nakamura. Bronson Reed says he dominated the whole match, and that wasn't until I beat you when Shinsuke Nakamura is behind Bronson Reed. And, Shinsuke just mentions that he beat Bronson Reed, and basically we end up getting a match between Ricochet and Shinsuke Nakamura. But before that, we actually ended up getting a video package on Johnny Gargano. Yes, Johnny Wrestling. Basically, he in this video package, he says that people call him the underdog, and what he possesses is something that people can't measure. He traveled for 10 years to live his dream, and he finally lived his dream, and he was told that there wasn't no dream. 5 years later, he ended up being the face of NXT. They show highlights from NXT, from DIY, the feud that he had with Tommaso Ciampa after that, after DIY split, all the moments of Johnny Gargano's NXT run. And now he is a staple on Monday Night Raw. So go ahead, underestimate me. That is where I thrive. I might not be the biggest, but I work tirelessly. And he has fun doing it in his own special way. And Johnny Gargano, the Johnny Gargano story is just starting. So very interesting, that second to last line. He has fun doing what he does in his own special way. Of course, the way is starting to become a staple on Raw. And of course, they're teasing the return of Tommaso Ciampa because I believe he was on the injured list. So hopefully they can tease a reunion of DIY, but also the way can become a faction on WWE television, because you kind of have the staples right there. You got Dexter Lumis, you got, of course, Candice LeRae, all those other people with Johnny Gargano. So hopefully they can start to reform the way. It's kind of already reformed, but it's not like official. But the way is definitely going to be a mainstay on Raw. And when Tommaso Ciampa comes back, they're gonna definitely reunite DIY. After that, we got Ricochet versus Shinsuke Nakamura. This was a relatively short match, but it wasn't a bad match whatsoever. We got a shoulder tackle by Shinsuke, followed by an arm drag by Ricochet. We got a side headlock takeover by Shinsuke, but then we get a bunch of back and forth technical wrestling by both men. Ricochet ends up going for the head scissors, and then we get a back elbow by Shinsuke. Ricochet ends up hitting the drop kick, but then Ricochet runs into a kick by Shinsuke, but then Shinsuke gets sent onto the outside. Ricochet ends up hitting the senton, and once we're back from commercial break, Shinsuke tries to go for the inverted exploder suplex, but then Ricochet lands on his feet. Ricochet then lands into a back elbow, but then both Shinsuke and Ricochet go for exchanging of shots. Ricochet ends up hitting a kick on Shinsuke, but then he drives down Shinsuke on the top. We then get a running shooting star press by Ricochet, but then we get a cover and a near fall. Ricochet misses the kick, and then he misses an enziguri and ends up hitting it on Shinsuke. After that, Ricochet lands into the corner. Shinsuke ends up hitting a knee, and then we get a sliding German suplex by Shinsuke Nakamura. After that, we get a sliding kick by Shinsuke after missing another kick beforehand. After that, Shinsuke ends up hitting the exploder suplex. Shinsuke runs into a knee, and then he hits the recoil, that being Ricochet. He hits the recoil on Shinsuke. Ricochet goes to the top, but then Shinsuke comes in. Both men are on the top. Bronson Reed ends up getting involved, and he causes a DQ. He hits a double-stacked splash by Bronson, says Corey Graves on commentary. And he drives Ricochet into the corner, and Bronson Reed ends up hitting the tsunami. Yeah, man. Could this be a scenario in which Bronson Reed ends up going in the Money in the Bank? Because you know how WWE is. They love their second chance matches, and could, they book a second chance match and have a guy like Montez Ford or Bronson Reed win that particular match. I have absolutely no idea, but in storyline, he's pissed off that he's not in the Money in the Bank because Shinsuke beat him, and also Ricochet is in the Money in the Bank ladder match, so Bronson Reed wants to be in it. What if there's a scenario in there, if there's a second chance match and, you got Bronson Reed end up, winning that match. We're just going to have to wait and see. But always keep an eye on Bronson Reed because I actually like what they're doing with Bronson Reed. They're definitely booking him really well, and they're keeping him strong. After that, we got MITB with guest Cody Rhodes. We got a bunch of Cody chants by the crowd. Miz tells Cody that he looks dashing tonight. He talks about last week on him challenging Brock Lesnar, who beat him at Night of Champions, who broke his arm, and he wants him to show up in any city he is and fight. Don't you think that's stupid? Asks Miz. And Cody replies, well, Miz, he heard people say it's crazy, and someone, said that it took balls. And he knows that, he knows tiny a bit about that. Of course, he's mentioning the whole balls thing to the Miz. Miz gets pissed off. But, he guesses he won't see that for a while. And Miz says, we love controversy and we love being surprised. And it's better than Brock Lesnar being here since he had a family tradition. And he invites another man who shares the same pressures as him as a generational talent. And he invites Dominic Mysterio. Dominic Mysterio and Rhea Ripley come out. Rhea says Dom has something he would like to say. Dominic tries to speak, but the boos are so fucking loud. Dominic is a fucking heat magnet. After that, Cody is like, don't boo Dom. And then the boos get louder. Rhea gets pissed off. And she says, so show some respect to my Latino heat. And then Dominic speaks. And he says, Cody, when The Miz invited him out here, he listened to him talking like he was the big dog from the yard. But someone like him who's done time, he's just a little birdie with a broken ring. And he watched him riddle his long list of crappy towns that Brock could find him in. And he realized he's a bad father. He has a baby girl at home. He should be at home, but instead he is here just like Ray, who is a deadbeat dad. And Cody says that he has a lot of empathy for Rey Mysterio. The 15 minutes he spent in prison was definitely rough on him. He has a worse prison tattoo than he does. Then he went on to WrestleMania to have a match with his father. That match was more like a public spanking, says Cody Rhodes. Nobody is perfect. He knows Ray made terrible mistakes because he's looking at one. Ouch. Dominic and Rhea leave, but then Dominic ends up slapping Cody Rhodes and retreating immediately, going for that cheap shot. And after that, Rhea is basically blocking Dominic. After that, Cody is so pissed that he hit a right hand on The Miz. So, honestly, my biggest takeaway for this is, what did this segment do? It looks like Cody Rhodes is going to be feuding with Dominic at this point, and it looks like more likely that the next Brock Lesnar match that's going to be happening with Cody Rhodes is not going to be happening at Money in the Bank, but instead it's going to be happening at SummerSlam, which honestly, at this point, Roman Reigns has a lot of shit on his plate when it comes to the bloodline stuff. And as much as I want Cody Rhodes to wrestle Roman at SummerSlam, WWE is not going to go full-fledged with that, and they're going to wait until next year's WrestleMania, honestly. And it looks like Cody's next mini feud, I should say, is going to be against Dominic Mysterio. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens, but really there was no big takeaway in this segment rather than Cody Rhodes just verbally smoking Dominic. After that, we got Zoey Stark versus Natalya in a Money in the Bank qualifying match. Zoey is in control over Natalya throughout the beginning stages of the match. Natalya then tries to fight back and out-wrestle her. We get a shoulder tackle by Stark, but then we get a German suplex by Natalya. She ends up trying to go for the jackknife cover, but then we get a near fall. Natalya applies the sharpshooter on Zoey Stark, but then Zoey gets her hand onto the bottom rope. Natalya then ends up hitting a kick on Stark onto the outside, but then she sends Zoey back into the ring. Trish then takes out Natalya with a knee without the referee looking. And Zoey ends up hitting the Z360, and we get a cover, and Zoey ends up winning the match and qualifies for the Money in the Bank ladder match. I mean, this makes total sense. I mean, Zoey Starks is now partnered with Trish Stratus, so hopefully let's see what they will do, but I have no faith in WWE to see this partnership really go full-fledged. I think Zoey Stark is great, but the whole Trish Stratus heel run, in my opinion, has not been good whatsoever. The whole thank you Trish, in my opinion, has been kind of cringe. Her promos have been cringe. Unfortunately, Zoey Starks' promos have been cringe as well, but she isn't part of the Money in the Bank. Let's see what they do with her. I'm not sure what they're going to be doing with Zoey Stark, but we're going to have to wait and see what they do. After that, we got the wise man, Paul Heyman, backstage. He wants to invite us to join him this Friday night when a family drama plays out when Jey Uso makes his historic choice. You know, as the wise man, he is tasked to deliver unpleasant news. No matter how bad that news is, he needs to deliver it to Roman Reigns. This is one of those times. The news isn't pleasant. It will break up the dynasty. This Friday on SmackDown, Jey Uso will make his choice. And Jey Uso will choose and stand by his brother, and slow pause, Solo Sikoa. You can share a room with your twin Jimmy, but you will never be close in life to him than your tribal chief, Roman Reigns. And this Friday, live on SmackDown, Jey Uso will acknowledge that fact. Interesting words by the wise man, Paul Heyman. You know, it's safe to say that the Bloodline is must-see television at this point. It really is. And with the first line that Paul Heyman stated, like, you know, he says, invite us to join him this Friday night when a family drama plays out. This is definitely a family drama, and things are getting real interesting. And it's no secret that the Bloodline storyline is the hottest storyline in all of wrestling right now, and it's only going to get better. It kind of died down a little bit after WrestleMania, but after Night of Champions, it picked right back up where it left off, and it's only going to get better. Every Bloodline segment from now on is just going to be like just top notch, and they're just going to top themselves constantly. And you love to see it, man. Storytelling at its finest. And the biggest reason why this is one of the most successful stories in the history of the company is just the pure emotion that it not only has on everybody involved with the storyline, but the pure emotion that the fan himself are invested in. You know, the fans are really invested in this story, and you can tell by the emotion in every single reaction. When somebody turns their back on another guy, all you hear is just a big ass fucking pop by the crowd. That's how impactful this story is, and it's only going to get better as we head towards down the line in the future. And when it comes to Jey Uso, it's going to be very interesting to see what the decision that Jey Uso is going to be making, man. Could he side with his brother? Could he side with his younger brother? Honestly, man, see, I would originally state that, you know, maybe Jey Uso is going to go after Roman Reigns at Money in the Bank. Or other people were saying, what if it's a tag team match? What if it's the Usos versus Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa? I don't know, man. The unpredictability nature only gets better with this whole segment. And this Friday on SmackDown, I'm very interested and I'm very invested to see what is going to be going on. We got Indashir taking on Cedric Alexander versus Shelton Benjamin. This was a squash match. Indashir gets the win. Who cares? We then move on to the main event. We got Seth Rollins taking on Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight Championship. Overall thoughts on this match. This was a great match. Absolutely phenomenal match. And honestly, the message I feel like that WWE is trying to tell when it comes to the World Heavyweight title is this is going to be the Wrestlers Championship. This is going to be the Workhorse Championship, you know. That is exactly what it is, but it's still a secondary title. I don't give a shit what anybody says. The World Heavyweight Championship is going to be a secondary championship because every time when you compare the current World Heavyweight Champion to Roman Reigns is going to be at the top. The World Champion is going to be right here. It's just that simple. But nonetheless, Seth Rollins and Damian Priest definitely delivered a great match, just like this whole show. This show was very wrestling heavy. And honestly, man, if we get shit like this on a weekly basis, I'd be 100% down for that. But not every week you're going to hit a home run. And in most weeks, you know, WWE does not hit a home run, especially with Raw, because there's a lot of shit on the show that is just deemed very boring. But overall, the show was not bad. But let's get through with the match. Both lock up. We got a bunch of right hands by Rollins. Priest takes Rollins into the corner, but then Rollins reverses. We get a bunch of right hands and chops. We then get a back elbow by Damian Priest, but then Rollins drops the knee on Priest, sending him to the outside. Rollins then ends up going for a running knee on Priest onto the outside. Once we're back from break, Rollins takes Priest to the post. After that, Priest drops Rollins onto the timekeeper's area. Rollins then lands on his feet, and then Priest ends up hitting a right hand on Rollins. Once we're back into the ring, we get a bunch of right hands and kicks by Priest in the ring. Priest ends up going for a kick on Rollins, and then we get a cover and a near fall. We then get a back elbow by Priest, and then we get a cover once again and a near fall. Then we get a kick to the back of Rollins. Priest ends up hitting a right hand. After that, he drives the knee onto the back of Rollins, all of that. Followed by that, we get a back elbow by Rollins. Rollins ends up hitting the enziguri after that. We then get a clothesline by Rollins. After that, Priest is still up on his feet. We then get a kick to the midsection of Priest, followed by a clothesline by Rollins. Rollins ends up hitting the backbreaker, but then Rollins goes to the top. We then get a kick by Priest. We get a back elbow by Priest into the corner, but then Rollins catches him for a pedigree. Rollins ends up going for the roll-up, and then we get a near fall. Rollins then hits the sling blade. He follows up with a suicide dive. Once we're back from commercial break, Priest is on the top. Rollins comes in. He ends up hitting the superplex. After that, Rollins transitions from the superplex into the Falcon Arrow. We get a cover into near fall. Rollins then hits the suicide dive, and then he goes for a second tope. After that, he goes for a third tope, but then he pushes Priest after that third tope onto the announce table. But he doesn't go on top of the announce table. He goes over the announce table. After that, he takes Priest back into the ring. We then get a super kick by Rollins, and then he hits a splash off the top. We get a cover into near fall. We then get a right hand blocked by Damian Priest, but then Priest ends up going for repeated kicks onto the knee of Rollins. We then get a rolling elbow by Rollins, and then he drops Rollins headfirst onto the mat. We then get a cover by Priest and a near fall. Rollins then counters the South of Heaven chokeslam, but then both exchange shots. Rollins is on the top, but then we get a spinning kick by Priest. We then get a Hurricane Rana by Priest. After that, Priest fights off Rollins, but then Rollins ends up hitting the pedigree. We then get a cover by Rollins and a near fall, but then both men are on the apron. We then get a Priest missing a kick. After that, we get a chop block by Rollins. I believe it was roughly on the apron. And Rollins ends up hitting a power bomb onto the barricade, or I should say a buckle bomb on the barricade. Very similar spot to what happened back in 2016, where Seth Rollins did that exact same move on Finn Balor, which led to Finn Balor to get injured and relinquish the Universal title. Very similar spot right there. What happens after that? Balor interferes after he was told not to interfere. We then get a super kick on Finn Balor. Rollins runs into a lariat by Priest back into the ring. Priest ends up hitting the South of Heaven chokeslam. We get a cover and a near fall. We then get a super kick by Rollins, and then we get repeated strikes. And then Seth Rollins ends up hitting the stomp. We get a cover, and Seth freaking Rollins retains the World Heavyweight Championship. After that, Balor is in the ring. Both men face off, and after they faced off, it looks like we're going to be getting a, hopefully, program with Seth Rollins and Finn Balor for the World Heavyweight Championship. Overall thoughts on this match, man. This was a phenomenal match. Very, very phenomenal match. Damian Priest looked like $1,000,000. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, could this be a scenario of Judgment Day splitting up? I think the idea of Judgment Day splitting up is way too early at this point. You know, I feel like, people can say Judgment Day has scratched the surface and they're on the run of a lifetime, but I genuinely believe that Judgment Day hasn't scratched the surface. I do believe that. But, I do believe in the idea of, instead of breaking up and splitting up Judgment Day, I actually believe in the idea of expanding Judgment Day. And a lot of that has to do with the addition of J.D. McDonough. A lot of people on social media, and they even teased this on television, J.D. McDonough in the future is going to be a member of Judgment Day. And honestly, Judgment Day is on the verge of becoming the top faction on Raw. You got the Bloodline as your top faction on the SmackDown side, and you got the Judgment Day as your top faction on Raw. The addition of J.D. McDonough is going to be phenomenal because he 100% belongs in that group. But do I see Damian Priest getting kicked out in favor of J.D. McDonough? I actually do not see that being the case. I actually see J.D. McDonough just being added for the sake of being added. But who knows? But what it looks like is we're definitely going to be getting a program with Finn Balor and Seth Rollins heading into the future, and I'm 100% down for that because it gives Seth Rollins something to do as the World Heavyweight Champion. But overall thoughts on this main event, great match. Damian Priest looked phenomenal. He looked strong, and a lot of people are saying he should be set for a babyface run, but I do not think it's that time yet. But hopefully down the line, he will end up becoming a babyface, but I don't think right now is the time. But overall, great match nonetheless. But yeah, that was my Raw review from June 5th, 2023. Overall thoughts on this show. I thought the show was surprisingly, it was actually a pretty good show. I mean, you could easily say that Raw is not a good show, and there's a lot of reasons behind it. In most weeks, Raw is not a good show. A primary reason as to why is the fact that it's just 3 hours. The 3 hours for Raw just does not work, and it's very difficult to book a show that is 3 hours. But WWE is getting paid a bunch of money for that. So honestly, you can't really change that. But nonetheless, I mean, this week's Raw wasn't bad. I mean, it was definitely very wrestling heavy. I mean, there was a lot of reports saying that Vince McMahon made a lot of changes on the show, but if you really think about it, Vince was probably backstage because WWE Raw this week was in Hartford, Connecticut, and WWE headquarters is in Stamford, and I believe Hartford and Stamford are not that far apart from each other. So honestly, this was definitely, in my opinion, a very Triple H heavy show. But I didn't see a lot of Vince changes on this show. This was definitely a Triple H show regardless. But overall, very wrestling heavy show. This was a great show nonetheless, and hopefully WWE can keep on rolling into that as we head towards SmackDown this Friday and as we head towards Money in the Bank further down the line in a couple of weeks. But that was my Raw review from June 5th, 2023. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. Push that bell for notifications. I'm on the lookout for more videos right here on the Wrestle Havoc podcast, right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the frickin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is Flamin' Ricky DeRays, right here on the Wrestle Havoc podcast. Signing out. I'll see you guys later for the AEW Dynamite review.